Alright, so it looks like this is just a very busy time for machine shops, and it looks like the Kubota might not be back for quite a while, so I got a different engine to work on. And, well, let me get in there, start cleaning up the dyno room, and get it ready for this. We can get it on there, talk a little bit more about why it's here, and what it is, and what we want to do. Okay, so I'm about halfway through the installation process on this, and I thought it'd be a good time to stop and talk about what this engine is and why it's here. So it's a Chevy 383. It's got a Eagle rotating assembly in the bottom end. The block, I think, is a 69, and it's a 4-bolt block. And so the short block's pretty decent. I don't know what kind of pistons it's got in terms of, I'm assuming that they're flat tops. I don't know what those cylinder heads are. And what this engine is going to be going into, and has been in before, is like it's like a late 80s or early 90s Chevy S10. So yeah, it's been in there before, and I guess it ran pretty good. So probably there's an 8th mile track around here, and I guess he was running like mid 7s with it, so not too bad. Yeah. I guess what we'll talk about next is why it's here. And it's not actually here to be dyno tested. So we're not, at this point, I'm not going to guarantee that we're going to be doing like a real dyno test on this to measure the horsepower. So I just want to get that out of the way at the beginning. Again, let's talk about why it's here. This truck, I don't think, has really ran in several years. I remember seeing this truck at the drag strip when it was having the problems that it was having. And I didn't get a close look at it. I was off doing something else, but one of the things that they said it was doing way back then was these rear exhaust pipes in the back, even when the engine didn't have a load on it, they were glowing red, just like idling or like high idle. Anyway, a lot of people looked at it. Really, I guess they felt like some folks felt like it was the carburetor being the problem. Like, I guess it had several different carburetors on it. To make a long story short on that, he was just at his wit's end with it, and it got put up. Went to work on other things. So, but I think what's kind of gotten this truck kind of back out is that drag strip I was telling you about had been closed for a number of years. And it's under new ownership now, and it's reopened. So people around here are kind of getting their old stuff back out and, you know, freshening it up and getting it out there and ready to run again. So we can go do some drag racing. Okay, so that's kind of like where that engine ended, probably around eight or 9 years ago. So now what's happened in the meantime is the short block, it's still the same short block. Same rotating assembly, everything down there from the block, you know, the short block's all the same. Now what they have changed is they've gone to a different camshaft, they've upgraded the cylinder heads, and I'm not really familiar with those cylinder heads. I don't recognize them. The casting marks inside of there, I don't know what they are. I'd have to do some looking around, but they're not familiar to me. Cam lifters, cylinder heads, I think that's what the new stuff that it's got in it. And that brings me to why the engine's here. And the reason the engine's here, mostly, is they want the camshaft broken in. So it's a flat tappet camshaft. And I'm not going to say right at this point what the manufacturer is. Because if it doesn't go well, I don't want, I'm not here to, you know, there's a lot of ways a flat tappet break-in could go badly. And it's hard to figure out exactly whose fault it is. So I'm not going to say who the manufacturer is at this point. If it goes well, I'll tell you, but if it doesn't, then it's going to remain a mystery. So that's the other reason it's here, is to get the camshaft broken in. Now, getting back to that business where it was, the exhaust pipes were glowing red hot when it was not, when it was just idling, basically. The scenario where I have seen that happen before is when the ignition timing is very delayed. Basically, what I think happens when you have very, very delayed ignition timing is that you have high exhaust gas temperatures. And I think the reason that happens is that rather than the fuel burning while the piston's at top dead center and combusting right then and there, and then those gases pushing the piston down, rather than that happening, the fuel is lit, the piston is coming down, and the fuel is burning. And if it's delayed badly enough, what I think will happen is when the exhaust valve opens, it's possible that there may be some combustion still happening at that point. And basically, you can imagine how hot your pipes would get if you had your fuel and air combusting inside the pipe rather than inside the cylinder. That's one way I can think of that might happen. And I'm kind of wondering if there's a possible scenario where if the cam timing was off considerably, like maybe it was extremely advanced. Maybe the exhaust valve was opening way early, and in that case, blowing all that unused energy out the exhaust pipe and resulting in that pipe getting very hot. So what I want to do right now, before I finish the install here, and it's mostly done. It's getting to the point where it's just wiring and stuff like that, and hooking up the exhaust, which is always kind of a pain. What I want to do is come over here. The thing of it is like when I say that maybe the ignition timing was delayed, well, I know these guys know how to set the ignition timing on an engine. I'm certain of it, and do it properly. I know they know how to do it. But what if the timing marks aren't telling the truth, right? So what if you think you're at top dead center, but the timing marks on here aren't telling you the truth? So what I want to do is we're going to put a piston stop in cylinder number 1, and we're going to use that to find top dead center, the top dead center marks on this on the balancer, on the damper. Now we're here in the front of the engine, and this is the balancer, the damper, of course. And you can't see it in the shot, but over here there are different angles printed into the outside of this, and up here is the timing indicator. And you use this and the marks on this to know what your ignition timing is. And that if you see that mark right there, I've already got it where so it's on 0 here and it's on 0 here, and I put that mark there so you can see it. And so basically, according to the marks here, here, and here, on this and this, it's supposed to be at top dead center right now. Now let me talk about how could that be wrong. When you got all new parts, you got new crank, new damper, looks like a new indicator, how could that mislead you? Well, one of the ways it could trick you is there's about 4 different ways in the manufacturing of these parts that could cause that mark to be incorrect. So you got the keyway, you got the key in the crankshaft, and that needs to be machined in the proper place. If where that key is on the crankshaft isn't in the right place, it'll skew this off one way or the other. Another place in the manufacturing of the components that could cause this to be kind of wrong is the keyway in the damper. So if that's not in the right place, it could cause this to be skewed again. And there's also the way this outer ring here is fitted on to this inner ring here. So that's another way it could be. And then you got the timing indicator and how it was manufactured and or installed. How many different ways did I think of? There's the crank key, there's the damper key, there's the outer ring to inner ring, and then another one would be if the markings on here were put on properly. That brings me actually to more like 5. So there's about 5 different ways in the manufacturing of the components that matter for the timing mark. There's about 5 different things that could have gone wrong that would make you believe that you were setting the ignition timing right when in fact you weren't. And now, while I'm sitting here thinking about this, I want to talk about one other thing that I saw a long time ago. But we were at the track with the Camaro, and it had a 350 in it. It was just it's a 350 horse 350, and it had the stock damper on it. We couldn't keep the thing cool. The thing overheated. It was a long day. We checked everything, and to make a long story short, what had happened on that was that it was an old damper, and the rubber in between the outer ring and the inner ring had gone bad, and this outer ring had begun to slip around on here, and it made it look like we had set the ignition timing properly, when in fact it was badly delayed. And that was making it overheat. So what I want to do is, like I said, I'm going to go over and we're going to use the piston stop and verify that the timing marks on this are correct. Okay, and this is just the piston stop that I'm going to use for reference. And if you've never used a piston stop before, the real key to them is just when you're turning over the crankshaft, turn over as gently as you can. Because if you really run into this hard, you could possibly damage the top of your piston. So, alright, having said that, let me go put this in. Another thing you want to do when you're installing the piston stop is that you want to move your crankshaft some degrees, a decent number of degrees away from top dead center, so that when you're installing it, the piston stop isn't right up against it there. Okay, so I've got the piston up against the stop, turning the crankshaft this way. So let me mark the crank right there, and there's the 0 on the indicator here. So now what we'll do is we'll go around the other way, and if that's the correct top dead center, then this mark here will be right in the middle of these other two marks. So let's bar it over and see what we get. Very close. Alright, so I can sit there now. So we get top dead center right about there, and to me it looks like it's very close. It should probably, top dead center is probably, true top dead center is probably over here, but that's maybe, I'm guessing the real mark's probably over here someplace. But that really is, if that's the case, it's off by maybe 4 degrees. That doesn't explain the hot exhaust pipe problem. Alright, well, worth checking. Not the problem, but worth checking. So I just got stung pretty bad on this engine, and it had to do with what I was kind of warning you about before, being careful with the piston stop. Now, what happened was I did have some interference with the piston stop, but it wasn't with the piston. I didn't run up hard against the piston. I did that part of it right. But I'd never used that piston stop on this type of a cylinder head. And what happened was, because of the way it is, the piston stop had to go in quite a ways in order for it to touch the piston. Well, when it's in that far, and when the spark plug is in this kind of configuration, the exhaust valve can interfere with it, and it did. So the piston came down, or the valve, the exhaust valve came down, and it pushed down on the piston stop, and it pushed down on it pretty hard. It left a mark in the piston stop, and it bent it slightly. So it pushed on it pretty hard. Now what I don't know is, did the valve get bent? I don't know that yet. So I did a leak down test on it, and it passed that. So if the valve is bent, it's not very bent, and if it's damaged, it's not very damaged. So here's what I have to do now. What I have to do is I need to take this cylinder head off, and I need to get that, have a look at that exhaust valve and see if it's damaged. And if it's not, then I got lucky and we can just roll with it. But if it is damaged, I'll have to get a new exhaust valve for this. So what I want to do next is kind of show you why I've never had this problem before. So let's go look at a different cylinder head, and I can show you why I've never had this problem before. Basically, it's got to do with the cylinder heads that I'm accustomed to using. Have the spark plug that kind of goes in like this, rather than on that engine the spark plug went in this way, and this cylinder head's off of an AMC. So yeah, the spark plug goes in on this way. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this around and show you, give you a better idea about what happened. And what I've got is it's just a 3/8 extension, and on this cylinder head, basically the piston stop would come through like this. And on this one, the piston stop wouldn't have to go in very far at all. Maybe just like that, in order to contact the piston. So it wouldn't have to go in very far at all. Now, let's just suppose that it was in quite a ways, and we open the exhaust valve. Now I have to open that exhaust valve about over an inch in order for that exhaust valve, almost probably like an inch and a quarter, maybe. You have to open up the exhaust valve about that far in order for the valve to interfere with the piston stop. If assuming that the piston stop was out that far, which it never would have been. But so, and no engine that I ever work on has that much valve lift. So on this engine, I could put that piston stop in there and check TDC all day long and never have a problem. You can see with the intake valve, it would never interfere with it. But on that other engine, it did. So why was it so bad on that engine? Well, I can't show it exactly with this cylinder head, but basically in that cylinder head, the spark plug went in like this. Only it was, you know, out. It was obviously up further. But this is the best way I can demonstrate it. But with that, and then the other thing about it was that because the piston stop had to go in so far, basically very much ready to interfere with the exhaust valve. So that's what's happened. I'm basically telling you this not because I like talking about the mistakes that I make, but maybe save you some trouble in the future. Let me go in there and I'll start getting that cylinder head off of there. Okay, so I got the cylinder head off of the engine, and you can see in this video here how much interference there was. So yeah, I gotta get that valve out and have a look at it, see what's going on in there. Okay, so I got that exhaust valve out, and I really can't see any blemishes on there, so, but that doesn't mean nothing happened. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this valve and put it very loosely into my mill chuck, and I want to see if I can measure any kind of run out on some of these surfaces. And if that's the case, then maybe, well, we'll have a look at that. We'll see if we got any run out there. So let's do that next. I've never been in a position where I needed to check for the run out on a valve before. So this is the first time I've ever done it. But what I have it in there is just very, very loosely, kind of gently held in there, because I'm guessing that the material that the chuck jaws are made out of is probably harder than what the valve is made out of. So I don't want to put that in there too tight and damage the stem. So, you know, doing it this way, I measured the run out both in this area here of the valve and out here on the end. And I'm measuring between 1 and 2 thousandths. And I'd say that's probably acceptable. So from what I looked around, it sounds like 1 to 2 thousandths is probably okay. So that means that I think it's unlikely that what I did not bend the valve somehow or another. And apparently, so I think 2 things kind of saved me from really damaging this thing. One of them was that I noticed that the valve lifters weren't pumped up with oil. So they hadn't had any oil pressure in them at all. So with the push rod, I just pushed down on it, on the plunger and the lifter, and it collapsed down about 100 thousandths. So I think that might have saved me a little bit. The second thing that I think might have saved me is that I think what ended up giving was what ended up bending out of the way was the piston stop. So I'm guessing that might have been made out of a softer material, something that bent easier than I would have expected. So I think 2 things kind of saved me here. One of them being the lifters hadn't been pumped with oil yet, and the bending ability of the piston stop. And now what I got to do next is put all this stuff back together and get it back on the engine and get back to the task at hand, which was to break the camshaft in. Alright, let's move on. Okay, so let's get back into what we need to do to break this camshaft in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be following the manufacturer's instructions as closely as I can. We got the cylinder head here, and these are the valve springs that a machine shop picked out for it. They're pretty close to what the camshaft manufacturer recommended for the camshaft we're using. But in the instructions for the camshaft break-in, it says if you've got dual valve springs, then you want to take out the inner valve spring. Well, on this valve spring has two valve springs in it, but it's not that one in the middle there. That's not coming out easily, and I don't think I'm going to get that out of there at all. So what we need to do is we need to measure the some dimensions on this. Well, what I want to do, I want to measure the force that the spring is exerting on the valve at the installed height, and I want to measure what force the spring is exerting on the valve when it's at full lift. And basically this camshaft is it's advertised at 500 thousandths valve lift, pretty much on the intake and exhaust. It's 498 on the intake and 500 on the exhaust. But that's for a 1.5 rocker, I'm pretty sure. And this engine's got 1.6s on it. I can't remember what that came out to be, but it's about 530 some thousandths, like 533 lift on there. So I need to find out some information about these springs. Well, the idea is that you break the camshaft in with the lighter springs, and that's what the cam manufacturer suggested. We can talk about that in a little bit. So, but what I want to do is we'll go over and we'll measure what these are, and we'll see if we need to make any changes. So let's go do that. And what I'm seeing there is about 150. So that means when the valve's on its seat, there's 150 pounds of force there. So, and then the next thing is, I wanted to see what the force was at when the valve's fully open. And in this case, with the 1.6 rockers, we should be around, I'm thinking it's like 533, but I could double check that real quick. Yeah, so it should be, the maximum valve lift should be around 533 thousandths. Now, there's a lot that goes into that. Like the valve probably won't open that far actually, because there's a lot of there's things in the valve train that deflect, like the rocker arm, the push rod, the rocker stud. All these things are like springs, and they stretch and bend and deflect. So probably in reality, that 533 thousandths is probably going to be, a few thousandths less than that. So it's looking like we're very close to 350 pounds. So about 350 pounds of full lift. Here's the numbers that I just recorded, and that was for number 1 on the exhaust. So the question is, when you're breaking in a flat tappet cam like this, is that too much? Or is that too much? Well, I guess my answer to that is I don't know. So what I did was I reached out to the retailer that sold us the camshaft, and I asked them, well, what do they think about these numbers? And so here's basically what they said to me was that what they did was they looked up the valve springs that the camshaft manufacturer recommends for this camshaft. And I think what they said was the seat force on the springs that the camshaft manufacturer recommended were like 130, I'm going to call it 135 pounds of force on the seat. What they also said was that particular valve spring that the manufacturer sells for that camshaft is a dual valve spring. In that spring, you can take the inner spring out of it. So nope, so two things going on here. We've got a spring seat force higher than what the cam manufacturer says us to use, although granted it's not remarkably high, but it's higher. And with their spring, they say take out the inner spring, so that you can probably take that 130 pounds of force and drop it down maybe to 100. I'm going to guess that. If you take the inner spring out, I'm going to maybe guess that 135 pound spring might turn into a 90 to 100 pound force spring, but that's just my guess. So what I decided to do was, because these springs that I've got don't have really a removable inner spring, my decision was to look for another set of springs to use during the break-in process. What I'm going to tell you next is the spring that I chose to do this with, and it's right here. It's a Melling VS2229, and I'll tell you, first off, I'll tell you what this is for. And basically what these springs are for is they're stock replacement springs for a, I think I looked it up for like a 1997 full-size Chevy pickup with the 5.7 in it. So basically that should have the Vortec heads. And I looked up the diameters of the springs that I picked out, and they're quite similar to the spring diameters of the ones that are in the head already, which kind of makes sense because these cylinder heads here are supposed to be, the way I look at it is that they're very similar to the factory Vortec heads. Maybe like with some slight upgrades, but basically, so at any rate, it kind of makes a little bit of sense to me that these factory Vortec springs might be a good fit in here dimensionally. And the other thing about them is that I think, I can't remember what they were advertised at for the installed height. So anyway, the inner diameter was good, the outer diameter was good, or very close, and the installed height was very close. I can't remember what they said. Maybe it was like 1.7 inches of installed height, and these heads here with these retainers and locks are at 1.8. So I felt like that was a pretty good match. Now, the next thing, so there's a couple of things I want to check out with these springs, and one of them is, one of the things with using this stock kind of spring here is that it really wasn't meant to be used in an engine with 500 thousandths valve lift or 530 thousandths valve lift. So what kind of problems could that cause? You know, this valve spring was probably meant to be used in an engine with probably less than 400 thousandths valve lift. So what kind of problems could that possibly cause for me? If you open the valve up too much, there's obviously going to come a point where the valve spring binds up. And you don't want that to happen because it's going to wreak havoc on your valve train. It's going to basically turn, you know, your spring into a spring with an infinite spring rate, and that's going to bend push rods, it's going to break a lot of things, and probably wipe out the camshaft in the process. So that doesn't sound like a good time to me. So what I want to do is I want to do some checks on this spring, look it over, see, and what we need to find out is what the height of it is for spring bind. Now, the nice thing of it was this spring, it was advertised, they let us know what the bind height is, and it was 1.2. So let's talk about why, the other reasons I picked this spring, and hopefully that it'll work, is so that we got 1.8 inches of installed height. It'll bind at 1.2 inches high. That gives us 600 thousandths to work with, and we've got about 533 thousandths of potential valve lift, and that leaves us with like a 67 thousandths worth of clearance to bind. So, and that is actually kind of that should be acceptable, and actually it's what some people recommend is about 60 thousandths. I've heard between, depending on how you measure it and everything, I've heard between 40 and 60 thousandths distance to bind. That's the way I read it. So let me get this over there and let's do the same checks on this spring. Okay, so we can see that this one is significantly lower. We can see that this one is significantly lower than the other one. And on the seat here, I'm measuring about 60 pounds. So, yeah, this spring is remarkably less stiff than the other one. And now what I'll do is I'll bring it down to 533. And there we're reading about 200. So these springs, yes indeed, are quite a lot less forceful than the other springs are, which should be good. So that's basically the valve at the installed height right there. So let's bring that down. So basically, what would it be? If what they're saying that the springs bind at 1.2 when their height is at a 1.2, and we're at 1.8 right now, would mean they would bind at, when I drop this down, 600,000. So let's do a look at that real quick. I'm actually able to drop it down below 600 thousandths or above. I can actually move it down lower than 600 thousandths. To me, that's it completely bound up at 727 thousandths. But how they measure it, I'm not 100% sure. So, I don't know, those are the things I wanted to check. To me, it seems like it's passing. I think it's going to do okay. I think I'm going to do some more checking around here off camera so I don't have it kind of distracting me, so I can think about it a little bit more closely. But I just wanted to give you an idea of how I'm checking this. Alright, so we'll move on from there. Okay, so this is not meant to be a commercial. None of this is sponsored. I'm just showing you this for the sake of showing you this. Part of what my plan is for the oil that I'm going to put into this engine for break-in. And I'm just using a 1540. I don't think it matters what brand you use, but I'm using a 1540 diesel, heavy-duty diesel engine oil. I'm using the 1540. So whether that's right or if that's the best idea, I'm not sure. And then I got a break-in additive for it. And what I'm going to do is, I don't want the additive and the oil mixing together inside the engine. I want to mix these two things together first and then pour the oil into the engine. So let's do that. And I'm using 5 quarts of oil versus one container of this. So that's another review. No, pour. Pour for me for the 1 gallon quart. Yeah, quart, so I can mix it a little bit more. I just went through and adjusted all the valves, and I did it by the book, per the instructions. And what they said was give it 1 full turn of preload past 0 lash, And that's what I did on all 16 of them. Did it the same way. Okay, so now that I got the preload set, now what I want to do is, I've got a oil priming tool, and I want to spin the oil pump over. I'm going to try priming the oil system next. Alright, so I got it all put together. I got the ignition timing set. The carburetors should be okay. It came right off the budget 302. So yeah, I've had it running a little bit just to get the timing set, and it starts up and runs. Not hearing anything weird. It's got oil pressure. So I guess what's left to do is just do this thing. And I'm just going to follow the instructions as best I can, unless I may have to stop in the middle of this at some point. It's possible. Basically what the instructions say is start it up, bring it up to 2,000 to 2,500, kind of keep it in between those two speeds, have it go in between those two speeds as you're doing the break-in. So that's the plan, and they say to do that for half an hour, which sounds like a long time, but I guess that's what I have to do. I think I'm just going to keep the camera rolling for the whole thing if I can. During the video I'll probably clip out parts of it because it's just going to be boring. So let me get it started. Let's start this break-in process. So here's a better look at that spark plug wire that got scorched. So what I got to correct it, got some of these wire protectors here, and the package of these stainless steel zip ties. So let me go through and I'm going to put one of these on each one of these and see if that doesn't help us. Alright, I got all these boots installed here, and I'm ready to try this again, see how we do this time. We got through a total of 30 minutes. And from the sounds of things, I'm not gonna really say the verdict's in yet. So, but the next thing we gotta do is gotta get this engine all cooled down, pull the valve covers off, and then switch it back over to the service springs. So I got all the light break-in springs removed, and I got the service springs installed, got the rocker arms back on, and I got them all adjusted. Now what I did there was I brought them down to 0 lash basically, and then gave them 1 full turn of preload, and I did it that way because that's what the instructions said to do. Alright, so let me get the valve covers back on, and then we can talk about what I'm going to do next. Okay, so basically I've got the engine all back together. Looking at the instructions, basically the only thing left to do there would be to change the oil on this. And of course using the recommended oil and or the break-in additive. So basically, going by the instructions, I'm essentially done. But what I want to do next is I just want to run this for a little while, maybe 10-15 minutes, with the service springs in it, and just get it through that. And I think after that I'll be ready to call it, send this thing. But anyway, let's do that. Let's run it for a little while and see how we do. I think I'm done here. I think I'm done running this. All I want to do is start it up real quick, and I want to listen to it idle, and I want to hear the valves. And if they sound normal, then I'm going to move on. From what I can hear from that valve train, it sounds okay to me, so I'm ready to move on. There's one last thing I want to do, and that is I want to pull that oil filter off, and let's cut that open, and that'll kind of give us an indication of whether or not this cam break-in went halfway decent or not. So let me get that off of there, and we'll have a look at that next. Alright, so there's that filter. I'm just going to go through and leaf through these pleats and see if there's anything strange. The other thing I'm going to do is look in the bottom of the... kind of wanted to show you the bottom of the... and I see some small bits of debris in there, but it doesn't look like anything alarming. So that's what that looks like. There's a little bit of stuff in there, but it doesn't look to me like looks non-metallic to me. The magnet. Yeah, that stuff didn't look like anything to be concerned about, in my opinion. So let's keep going through these pleats here. So I'm really just not seeing anything alarming about this. I don't see sparkly metals. I don't see anything really alarming to me. There's little bits and pieces of dirt, but they don't look like metal parts to me. Nothing shiny, nothing flaky, nothing like iron dust or anything like that. It doesn't, it looks, in my opinion, this filter looks okay. And then I'm gonna just take a magnet and run it through some of these spots here. Just pick one and kind of go in there like that with it. And nothing's coming off with that. So I think I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna go glass half full and say that this probably went okay. But really only time's gonna tell in the long run if the cam's gonna hold. So, but for me and what I have to do here, I'm gonna say I'm finished, and that I think it went okay. Let's go back into the engine room and do a conclusion. We'll wrap this video up. I guess I just want to go over a few things that I kind of learned along the way, and some of the things that I think matter when doing when trying to break in a flat tappet cam. And I am aware of the massive problems that there was a few years ago, and so yeah, I was aware of that. But at any rate, to wrap this up, let me just go over a few things here. Now, when it comes to this cam break-in, the risks involved with running a flat tappet cam, if you want to get away from that completely or almost completely, then in my opinion the best way to do that would be just to switch to a roller cam. But I know that's not in everybody's budget. So in my opinion, roller cam would avoid a lot of these problems, but they are kind of expensive sometimes. The next thing I would say is just if you're going to do a flat tappet cam break-in, I think in my opinion, you need to follow the instructions, and you need to follow the instructions exactly. Because I did put a tech request in with a company, and what they told me was that about, at least these days in 2025, about 90% of the flat tappet cam failures are the result of people just not following the instructions. In my opinion, follow the instructions. I guess the next thing I would say is make sure you're using the right oil and or additive. So I saw that there were oils available that already had the additive in it, but I didn't go that way. I went with the 1540 and a break-in additive. So that's the way I did it. So keep an attention on that you're using the right oil and or additive. I think that's going to help you. Another thing that was brought up in that tech question that I submitted was that another source of some of the flat tappet cams failing is the spring force being excessive. What excessive means, I don't know. I don't really know, so you may want to do your own research on that. But what I did here again is I used the stock the springs from a stock Vortec head. I can't remember what it was. It's in the video, I think. So if you want to review it, you can. But when it comes to just keep an eye on that, and if you don't know what your springs are, either measure them or get them measured, and then do your research and find out, are those spring forces going to be acceptable during the break-in. The instructions that I have say that look at your springs, and if it's got a removable inner spring, then take it out during the break-in. That's what they said to do. They didn't mention anything about measuring it or measuring the spring rate or the forces or anything like that. They just say take out the inner one if it's got one. Now when I measured these ones here, the service springs, it seemed to me like they were on the high side. so they were a little on the high side. So it was, I felt like it was good enough insurance. The stock springs were not much money. I think they were like $40. So that's the way I did it. And then I think something else that I've heard is that what seems to work out better is that if you buy the cam and lifters as a set, what might even be one better is if you bought the whole valve train as a set. But that's something else. But like I said, what seems to be better is if you buy your cam and lifters in a set. That is to say that the cam and lifters are going to come in the same box. What I've heard people kind of recommending against is, like, you know, going for a camshaft that's the best deal and then going over and getting the lifters that are the best deal and putting those together. That might yield some complications. I'm not sure about that, but that's my suspicion. So, knock on wood, fingers crossed, I think we got through it. And basically I'm ready to hand this engine back to the customer. Although we may have a couple other things to work on here before that happens, but I don't have much going on right now, so no problem with this thing hanging out for a little while. Okay, well that's about all I got for this week, and I'll see you next time.